Okay, so it's 5 p.m. here in Bangkok. Time for us to get started. Welcome everyone to the DNS Delegation Working Group meeting. I'm Dwayne Wessels. My co-chair, Brian Haberman, is unfortunately not able to be here, but he's on remote. And I've got Tommy sitting next to me for moral and other types of support, so thank you, Tommy. Go through the chair slide here really quick. All right, so first is the standard note well, which hopefully everyone has seen by now, that describes your expectations for behavior and participation in the IETF, as well as the really note well, which reminds everyone to be respectful and kind to each other, and that harassment is not tolerated here or on the mailing lists. Everyone in the room, please sign in to MeetEcho using the on-site tool. Use the QR code. We'll use the MeetEcho queue for questions both in the room and remote. We also will be doing some, most likely be doing some show of hands towards the end of the meeting, so that's another good reason that you should join. In case you need it, here's links to various resources for this IETF meeting. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we hope to accomplish today, the goals for today for this working group. On the list, there was a pretty strong preference expressed for the working group to adopt a single protocol approach for further work. So today we're going to have presentations from authors of what I'll call Draft Hamburg and Draft Westblap. We want the group to discuss the pros and cons of those drafts today, have a very good discussion, a very thorough discussion, and then in the coming weeks, we'll formulate a consensus call to select one of those drafts to adopt for further work going forward. Here's our agenda. Before we get into the agenda, I want to acknowledge Warren as our outgoing area director for another, I don't know, day or so. Thank you, Warren, for helping get this working group started and guiding us and everything. That was very beneficial. Appreciate it very much. Eric Vink will be our new area director shortly, and I think this will also all be communicated on the mailing list in a more formal manner at some time coming up. So thank you both. Okay, so the agenda for today, we're going to prioritize on business before the working group, which is to get through the goals I previously mentioned, to cover the two protocol drafts, the base specifications of those drafts. We have 15 minutes for both groups, both presenters. We'll start with Draft Hamburg. Tim is going to present that, I believe. And 15 minutes for that, and then 15 minutes for Draft Westblap. And then we hope to have a very thorough discussion, maybe as long as 50 minutes, some show of hands and things like that. And then time permitting, we have an agenda time request from Philip Hamburg to talk about his draft on incrementally deployable DNSSEC delegation. Any questions or concerns before we proceed? All right, Tim, looks like you're almost ready. Let me share the slides for you.
Let me see if I can make this work.
And I have to remember which one you are. I think you're this one.
Yes.
Oh, I got it right. Okay.
Way to go.
Do you need me to pass control to you?
No, you can run these because there's not many of them, and our goal is to basically just sort of give you the highlights and let the conversation take over, kind of thing, right?
Okay, sounds good.
So if we slide over to the next slide, we took all the the feedback in from the previous thing, we moved from SVCB to closer to the DELEG RR type. We call it IDELEG just to make it less confusing in all the discussions. That's the only reason why we call it that versus DELEG. And that just sort of helps things move along. And I saw Paul's comment about, what do you say? He had there, I think it was DD, I think. So it's all very reasonable. So and really we added a section on sort of the delegation point, why we think that's the motivation behind doing what's going on there, and some good comparisons with the current draft. So if we go to the next slide. Yeah, it's just we saw this discussion show up in Fujiwara-san's talk about zone ranking. The zone cut's always been problematic, right? And I think we've gotten good at sort of addressing it, but only because we spent a long time kind of fighting it, sort of thing, right? And there's just lots of good talk. So it's just a different way of looking at the problem. But if we go to the next slide, the best thing we have, I feel there's some concern that if we, with DELEG, I think it'll work, but I think we may end up with some of the same problems we've had with some of the what we've seen in the past with just weirdness is a good way to put it. So that's just me being commentary. So pass on to the next slide. You can't blame Will and Philip for that. We just went with, we used the DELEG underscore type. And I will say that I feel that, using these underscore labels is currently a best practice among, the application groups. If you go to look at stuff's going on in art and stuff like that, this is, they're all doing it, right? We came up with the registry and everybody's using it and they think it's great and we think it's great, right? So I just feel we should sort of, a DNS community should sort of look at it that way as well, right? I know we know DNS really well, but, it's also, it's an application as well as, I guess, the thing that runs everything. So anyway, if we go to the next slide, what's nice is, Will put together this really nice test bed that basically you guys can query and sort of see some of the data. There's a very good example of sort of what we see. And that's a real world example. If you slide to the next one, iDeleg.net, he sent this out, and you can just build this stuff and the drill commands work and you can get data back and sort of poke at it and stuff. And we're trying to basically make sure we covered all our use cases, and also some of the edge cases that we have in our document, things that we're worried about. So if we go to the next slide, I think Willem put something in here. Yep, just a little, I urge people to take a look at that if you're playing with it. I hope the other authors have sort of done so as well, because this stuff works. It's very cool to sit there and play with it and see what's going on. So if we go to the next slide, give Willem big props. He provisioned machines for testing the other draft, and you can do incremental testing, with the stuff that we have. The only difference is that draft needs changes to the auth servers to make it work. So it doesn't, that part doesn't cut it, but the rest of it does kind of show up. So if we go to the next slide, and so, and that's, slide over. That's the next slide is really the sort of the, we sort of, that's a good table that sort of helps explain. There's not, the differences are pretty, of what's going on there. And I think the auth server part is probably the one thing. And, we'll see how the rest of it plays out. So that's a good place for us to sort of look at it. So we go to the next one. I think that's basically it. Yeah, problem areas, everybody knows this. And so, we notice with our solution, you're going to see the same problem with underscore DELEG stuff as you will with AA and parent zones kind of thing. So if we go to the next slide, I think that's pretty much it. How will this roll out? Will it be quicker? I see, we all see a lot of horrors in the world, right? And I think, we're always going to see large enterprises running Windows servers that will never sign their zones, right? I've been told that by IT folks consistently, internally. They don't see the point in it, right? So it's kind of hard, it's the horrors that we see that we live with. So that's it. I think that's it for the talk. Like I said, we wanted to really sort of get people thinking about it. And I really urge people to build it and just, on the IDELEG.net site, there's a link to the stuff, and I built it on my Pi like in 5 minutes, right? And I was just sort of banging on zones and stuff with it. So I hope you all have done that or will do that. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tim.
Are there questions?
So yeah, we want to obviously have a discussion after both presentations, but if anyone has discussions or clarifying questions for Tim or the authors on their draft, feel free to do that now. We have enough time for that.
Okay. Oh, you see somebody.
Jeff Houston up.
Uh-oh.
No, it's not an uh-oh, and it's not the AI version or anything. We had a throwaway comment in one of those slides that said we need all the authoritative name servers in this model to be upgraded all at once.
Oh, no, not all at once. I think as, we're seeing the world become very centralized in terms of DNS services. There's just a couple, they'll upgrade very fast, but, how long is the tail going to be? And maybe 20 years ago, we would think we could never upgrade servers like that, right? Now I think we can, but I'm just wondering, where are we going to get there, right?
Okay,
I'm not negative. I'm very optimistic we can do it. I just,
But when I read all of them at once, which is what I thought I saw on the slide, it's kind of wow. Have you got it there, Dwayne? Sort of back about 2.
Yeah.
Comparison table. Yeah. Okay. But that was the thing that triggered. I'm like, that's unrealistic if that really is a requirement.
No, it's not a requirement. No.
Sure. Okay.
And that was me probably writing something incorrectly. So you cannot blame Will or Phil for that.
All right, thank you. Jim Reed.
Thanks, Dwayne. Jim Reed. Just a question of clarification. There's been a couple of quick comments being put in the chat, Tim, about the slide where you had the comparison between the two versions. There was claims made that slide was incorrect, and some said it's been corrected. So could we clarify if that slide you showed is the correct version that's been updated, or if there's still changes to be made to that?
That's in the 03 version of the draft, so we still may be wrong. And so I'm sure that the other authors will correct us if we are.
I'm making no comment on whether you're right or wrong, Tim.
So, yes, you are. That's okay. We believe that's more accurate, but I'm hoping the authors will set it straight.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Oh, go ahead, Andre.
This is Andre, I see. I would actually suggest to leave this table out of the draft, just so we are on the good terms.
Yep.
So I think this, it will create attention, so leaving it out of the draft might be a good idea.
And it wasn't put in there to sort of call that, call people out, right? It was more for us to, help explain to people how this, where things compare and contrast. But thanks, Andre.
Okay. Paul?
So just on what Andre just said, I don't think there's meant to be next versions of the draft.
No.
Right. I mean, I'm sort of pointing at you.
I mean, not before a decision is made.
Right. I'm sorry. And of course, there will be revisions of one of them afterwards. But we're talking here, I believe we're supposed to be taking what we have in the most recent versions of the current drafts, plus all of the discussion from the mailing list.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So
yeah,
I would say don't even show this slide right now, because there was discussion on the mailing list where people said, oh, you're right, that would need to be changed.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul.
Go ahead, Roy.
Roy Adams, ICANN. So in the past, we had confusion that the set on the parent side NS and the set on the child side NS were different, not always correct, and has caused a lot of confusion in the past. What is happening with this proposal is there's now a different part of the tree, right? So you have now again 2 points of administration. One is the NS record in the zone, and one is the underscore DELEG record the underscore DELEG tree with the IDELEG record in the shadow tree. for lack of a better term. What I'm missing from the draft is words around the concern of introducing confusion between the two trees. I had another concern, but I'll leave it for that.
Okay, yeah, thanks,
Okay.
Roy.
Yeah, I feel it's sort of very similar though to, the same problem we have with glue records, right? Getting stuck places. But yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. We're gonna move on to the next one. So let me get those slides up. Type updates. Would you like me to advance the slides for you?
Just go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, so this is the update from kind of what the last version was for the last IETF to this version. We ripped out a lot of text, and if you are a coder, you get a certain satisfaction of ripping out code or text, because usually stuff is more clear afterwards. But we may gone a bit too far, which some people already know is not main list. But the reason was, I mean, all of these stuff like motivation, why is this needed, why is it a good thing, we have the requirements draft that covers that, so we totally ripped it out. We also want to have an as minimal definition as possible and do all the advanced use cases, kind of like encrypted transport or the DNSSEC, change DNSSEC delegation into further drafts. So the core draft is really the one that has just sort of replaces NS with DELEG, including DNSSEC and all the kind of complexity around that, but not the transport stuff. We did just before the cutoff had also published the transport version of it, but it's probably in a bit of a need of some work. So the protocol structure that we have in the draft is that the DELEG type draft really wants to make sure that the DNS semantics are not changed. So pretty much the delegation point is where it is. We have NX, DELEG, and DS for DNSSEC at the same point as we have today. And we think this is a lot of easier to debug and understand. It also is a lot of easier to implement, especially on the resolver side. And when you think about it, resolvers are the probably most complex piece in DNS that we have. I mean, pretty much a lot of people have written authorities. We can do a show of hands. So show of hands, who has written an authoritative server in their life? Yeah. About half of the room. Who has written recursive resolver, full recursive resolver? So a lot of less people. And it is a complex thing. And we want to make sure that we have to add some complexity to add new protocols and to do these kind of advancement. But we want to make sure that the changes there are sort of as minimal as possible. And we also don't want to have additional queries and responses, because that kind of increases latency and makes stuff more complex. And another thing that's a bit of pet peeve of mine, this draft works with or without query minimization, whereas the underscore DELEG doesn't. It requires query minimization. And I think query minimization has its kind of like good sides, and it's probably a good idea to run it on a server that has a sort of a low load or is only serving a couple of people. But if you run a recursive resolver that serves hundreds of thousands of queries per second, mostly over DOE, then query minimization gives you no additional privacy. And without query minimization, it's still a performance benefit that you gain by directly discovering the delegation. So we want to keep that performance optimization alive, pretty much. And another thing that I cannot claim any credit for is we changed the thing in the draft. Actually, Bob Haley suggested that, and it's a brilliant idea. We added an explicit EDNS 0 signal flag. Similar to what DO does for DNSSEC, we now can pretty much say an additional flag says DE, and it means I understand and I want DELEG records. And that allows kind of the packets to be optimized, because the authoritative server that doesn't understand it just sends back NS as usual, no problem at all. And the resolver will kind of use that. The server that understands it, authoritative server, will send back the DELEG records. So we don't need to have both records in the packet, which means we have optimized packet sizes in referrals still, much smaller sizes. And of course, if the existing software doesn't send that bit, the DELEG-aware authority will always send back the NS records as usual. So this is, I think, much simpler and much faster way to get through the resolution. Next slide. So during the discussions, there were some issues found, and I just want to kind of comment on this. So we did, I think, a big shout out to Roy and Shumon, huge test last year if DELEG would work with existing resolvers. And we had no problem whatsoever. It worked perfectly. Now, coming to after the last IETF, we were thinking, well, which bits we're actually going to use for the production? And we said, well, maybe we use high bits so that we actually see the difference. There's a big difference. And we did that. And for our limited testing, it worked fine. But then I think both Not and Bind discovered that there was a problem with it. And the reason was that a very old RFC that was the, I think, first DNS sec trials. So it's nothing that's longer relevant anymore. Said that, well, the bits in the first byte have a special meaning. And we hit that special meaning, and that code still was kind of valid was still there in Not and Bind. So as soon as we changed it to bit 14 again, and we probably can use other bits, it just works fine. So in the end, there's no issues in deployment or backward compatibility with the new type, because all the testing we did was still valid. We just, there were some bits that we should not use. And there's more to do. There's more implementation to do. So again, what I urge here is kind of like authoritatives are much easier to do than recursive, because we have 5 different implementations already. Roy and Schumann did one, Bind9 has one, we have one, Akamai, and NSD, it looks like it doesn't have one, because I was confused when Willem brought up the testbed and said that he had DELEG support, which I don't think they have. So maybe we have just 4, but still, authoritatives are much easier to do than recursive. And we, of course, need to then kind of use the new protocol works, and we need to do more explanatory text, because, again, the current draft is really just a protocol. And I think if you go one slide back, because that's the thing, I should have promised this. 2 slides, sorry. On the right, there's, we want to keep it as simple, stupid, and short as possible, because we believe that long-term is the correct solution to get it deployed and to also have less failures going forward. Thanks.
All right, thanks a lot, Ralph. You might want to stay up here because there's a question already from Philip. You're in the queue. Go ahead, Philip. Not getting any audio from you yet, Philip. There we go.
Yeah, you said that incremental DELEG requires QNAME minimization, but that's not true. You can just as well do incremental DELEG without QNAME minimization. It's tricky to present in the draft all the combinations with unmodified authoritatives and stuff like that. So we cannot possibly cover all the variations, but and in our minds, QNAME minimization is a good thing, so we focused on that. But if people really insist on not doing QNAME minimization, then you can also have a resolver that doesn't do that.
How would you do that? Because you have to, I think, look for the DELEG label. If you want to delegate something, say 3 levels down, you have to then, first do the underscore DELEG for this, then strip it down. How would you do it? I don't understand it.
So the assumption is basically that in the future we will have DELEG aware name servers. I mean, you can also do it if the name server is completely unmodified, but let's assume for the moment that the name server is DELEG aware. In that case, you're not explicitly querying for the _DELEG delegation, just like today you're not querying for a delegation. You just say, I have this name and this queue type, please tell me something. And then the authoritative just comes back in the authority section, like, I found this _DELEG delegation, maybe that will help you. So
that would mean then it had to present both the NS and the DELEG records and at the same time. So the packet would be bigger.
Well, the thing is, if people really like the extra ETNS option, then of course that applies the same thing to incremental DELEG. That's we think it's not really needed, but the mechanism would work just the same.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I see Paul is in the queue. Go ahead, Paul.
So Paul Hoffman, DNSOP spent a lot of time on QNAME minimization BIS and trying to get the edge cases stated correctly and such like that. I'm uncomfortable both with what Ralph said and with what Philip said. If we're going to talk QNAME minimization, let's be exact. Let's say exactly where things are and are not working. I'm uncomfortable with what's in the Holmberg draft about QNAME minimization, and we can just do this. But I'm also uncomfortable with what's here. So when we're having the working group discussion, I would like more than just it works with or it doesn't work with QNAME minimization. I'd like worked out examples, because DNSOP spent a lot of time on the BIS trying to get that right.
Yeah, so let me answer that. QNAME minimization will work just fine with everything. The thing is that there are corner cases, and where for QNAME minimization to get to the actual delegation point with QNAME minimization, you need more than one query. These are just, I mean, there's nothing to work around that. And if you don't do QNAME minimization, which still is allowed, I mean, QNAME minimization is kind of like a privacy optimization. It's not kind of required per se. You then kind of get to the zone cut faster, and that's just what I mean, it's behavior as currently with DNS. Nothing changes.
Okay. Go ahead, Roy, since you seem very eager, but Jim is next.
Sorry, Jim, I didn't see you there.
Go ahead.
Right. Thank you. Roy Adams, ICANN. I just want to clarify something about this draft. This draft is orthogonal, independent of query minimization. So there needs to be no words in this draft about query minimization. This is not the case for the other proposal.
Thanks, Roy. Go ahead, Jim.
Thanks, Dwayne. I have to agree with the points that Paul Hoffman made a few minutes ago. I think we need a lot more clarity and precision around what we mean by this. And I think there's going to be a lot of stuff. I mean, Ralph was kind of hinting a few months ago about there are corner cases. Well, I don't know if we've got test beds which actually go through all these corner cases. It might be impractical to actually enumerate all of them. But I think to say that we've got a test bed and everything just works is a little bit simplistic. There's a lot more, I think, that needs to be done here. And I'm remembering back to the days when we were doing DNSSEC, we found out a hell of a lot more about zone cut semantics, but we tried to make that code work, and have a horrible feeling we might be going to revisit some of those battles all over again, and we might just gloss over them by saying, well, this solves all these problems. We don't have to worry about it anymore. I think the test beds need to be much more comprehensive than they are at the moment. I'm not trying to denigrate the work that's been done there. I'm glad it's been done, but I think there's a lot further to go, and we're still not clear what the next steps are likely to be.
No, I mean, I'll fully agree on test, but again, we had some testing last year, December, with Ryan Schumann, and we wanted to bring up a test bed. We, for reasons I can talk to you over a beer, just ran out of runway to actually have the test bed ready for the IETF, but we are working one, and it will be also publicly available. And then, I mean, we'll hopefully see stuff. I mean, if we hopefully don't see more breakage, but we then have it in the wild and people can test with it.
I think it might be helpful if we can try to get a list of some of the things that should be part of the test bed, other than what we have at the moment. Trying to sort of get that clear. These are the kind of things we want to test and evaluate. That would be very helpful.
Yeah. Andre?
So Andre, I see. Regarding to this draft, by9 is going to implement this as for testing. We just haven't had time yet, both on the authoritative and resolver side. So
Thanks. I think Willem is next. I'm going to close the queue. Or is it already closed? Thanks. Brian must have done that. Go ahead. Willem, you're up.
Okay. First, I want to set straight that our draft does not require Q&A minimization. This is simply not true. Because if you state that this is the case, then please tell me why. Also, there are examples in the draft where it illustrates how incremental DELEG benefits of not doing Q&A minimizations. It finds the zone cut faster that way. And then also, so I have created this test bed and it's completely public. You can transfer all zones and see other delegations which are in the zones. And the test bed also contains authoritative service for DELEG delegations, dus for WESPLAB DELEG. And it contains a resolver with which you can test not only the incremental delegations in the testbed, but also incremental delegations that you set up yourself. Right, because you don't need to run special authoritative software to make this work. And yeah, so it's very public and transparent, and everyone can see all the delegations and test cases. And I would invite a list to come up with those corner cases so that we can provision them and they can be tested for both versions. Also, Ralph, do you have a resolver implementation for the WESPLAB DELEG?
Yes.
Is it open source?
Oh. But I mean, again, the plan is to have a test bed up where this also is reachable. We have a resolver implementation. It works with the authority we have set up. I mean, again, we want to have a public test bed. We didn't kind of have the runway.
Did you test it at...
One clarifying question for you, though, and that is, you said you had servers for WESPLAB DELEG. So did you implement the authoritative side of it or not?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we have 5 implementations. Thanks.
Yes, you have 5 implementations on the authoritative side, yeah.
All right.
But we need only the resolver implementation.
Thanks, Willem. Tail.
Yeah, so I just wanted, Tail, add one thing that I thought was going to be on the slide and didn't make it, but we have definitely also heard the criticism that in taking too much out of the DELEG draft, that we did not leave behind some sufficient examples about like what to do in mixed environments, and also the what we have on developed in the queue waiting to go out for our next draft would cover some more of these situations about, well, what happens if you have an unaware resolver or an aware resolver in a mixed authority environment and so on. And so that just wanted to make note that yes, that particular criticism was heard, and one of the things that we intend to add back is more examples.
All right, thanks, Tail. And thank you, Ralph. All right, so that was a very good discussion. Thanks, everyone. What we want to do next is sort of put up some questions to continue the discussion. And the first of these is taken from something that took place on the mailing list, I believe. So there was a requirement H6, which requires incremental deployment. As a discussion topic, we would like to know if that means that it must be possible to serve a single zone by a mix of DELEG aware and non-DELEG aware authoritative name servers, or does that requirement mean something else? Some other questions that we want to put to the group. Hopefully by the end of the day, do you have any technical protocol concerns with draft WESTLAP? Do you have any technical protocol concerns with draft Hamburg? And then at the end, based on the discussions up to today, both on the list and in person, do you feel you could choose between the two drafts? So please consider these possible starting points for discussion, or if you have other things you'd like to discuss, bring these up. But this is what the chairs wanted to start with. So I see Warren is up in the queue.
Warren Kamari, Google. So this is more sort of a meta point. The DNS seems to be around 40 years old now. Apparently 1985 is when it launched. One of the things that I think we need to be keeping in mind, and this sort of goes towards point 4, is this is likely to stick around for at least another 40 years. And I think we should really be optimizing for making sure that it is clean and stable and understandable. Like, one of the things that I've had to do a bunch is explain to people how the DNS works, and making sure that newcomers can actually understand how this is all supposed to fit together, how delegations work, etc. And keeping it understandable, I think, is something that's actually an important thing to keep in mind, as well as like the technical part. I think I could choose between the two options, but I'm not going to say now which I think is, the simple, clear, obvious way to do it.
Thanks, Warren. Andre.
Andre, I see. I have a couple of notes for the first time at the IETF. So I do agree that we need a clean approach, but I don't agree that like fitting the things into existing DNS infrastructure is a clean approach. So we have time to deploy stuff, and I think that the IDELEG is just like Tim said, that we have a time to do this properly, and I think like slamming this inside the existing DNS tree isn't doing things properly. So the other thing that caught my ear was that the other applications are doing stuff with the labels in the DNS. We are not a DNS application, we are the DNS protocol. We are developing a DNS protocol, not an application that using DNS. So we should think from this from a DNS protocol point of view. The other thing about the incremental deployability, so who is the target audience for this? The main target audience, I think this is the root server, and TLDs would be the first users of the DELEG, whatever it ends up. And that needs an update in the provisioning at every level. So if you are going to deploy DELEG or IDELEG, you need to update your provisioning to generate the zones. And when you do that, I think just upgrading the servers is just a small thing to support the new protocol. So I also want to echo what Warren said. I teach DNS to students at university, and DNS is confusing to people as it is. I do think we need to choose one that is less confusing to newcomers to DNS, and in my books that would be the one that follows the hierarchy. And then I do have one comment on the IDELEG thing or question. Can you delegate the _DELEG, and what would happen? And that's all I have for now.
All right, thanks a lot, Andre. Appreciate all those. Ralph?
Okay, so I'm going to do a quick answer of the question. So in requirement H6, a mix of zone between DELEG and non-DELEG authoritative servers. So question back, can we have a mix of zone between DNSSEC and non-DNSSEC servers? The answer is no. So this is a similar change as to kind of DNSSEC. So having a mix is just a non-starter for me. And well, on 4, I can certainly choose.
Thanks, Ralph. Peter.
Hello, Peter Thomas and DSEC. I have a number of things relating to the hard requirements from the requirements draft. So H2 says name server records will continue to define the delegation of authority between a parent zone and a child exactly as they have before. That doesn't seem to apply to the _deleg label because that can't be delegated because of implications that make it not work. Of course, it can be pseudo-delegated with DNAME and all of that, but there is a change to the zone structure and delegation semantics. So I wanted to emphasize that. I'm not saying, I'm not judging it. I'm just putting it in perspective with this requirement.
Peter, are you saying that you think _deleg cannot be an NS delegation then? Is that?
It cannot. That's
okay.
Explicitly laid out in the draft.
Okay.
Then the hard requirement 5 says the DELEG must support updates to delegation information with the same relative ease as currently exists with NS records. I'm not sure if that was meant for automatic updates like csync based, but even for manual updates, I think it is a significant complication that one has to know what the _deleg thing means and what the semantics of it is, and it can't be its own zone. And imagine random DNS administrators that do all kinds of things, for example, in university departments. I do see a significant risk of getting that wrong all the time. And then there's like special meaning, like for priming stuff, the _deleg actually goes in front instead of in the back of the child label and stuff like that. So it's complicated. And then as for the first question here, requirement 6, I agree with Ralph that it doesn't mean, like incremental doesn't mean that you can't, that you need to be able to use a mix of aware and non-aware software. I think incremental means that not everybody has to deploy it at the same time for all zones, and that you don't need a flag day.
Thank you. Paul.
Let me just double on with what was just said. What you have there for number 1 is not what H6 says. H6 says DELEG must be incrementally deployable and not require any sort of flag day of universal change, full stop. Has nothing to do with what's up there. When we were discussing in the working group, what we meant was by incrementally deployable was you could deploy it even if your parent did not. That is, it could be incrementally deployable at any level in the DNS tree. Has nothing to do with all of your name servers or anything like that. And for that, both of the proposals work. The other thing I wanted to bring up, which was something that Warren started, which was to say we want something that's very clear. I don't find the overall introductions to either of the drafts to be very clear, but I also don't want the decision to be made on the wording in the drafts. Whatever gets chosen is going to get worked on by the working group. So if you feel that the wording for one of them is not clear, in my mind, that's not a negative against it. If you feel that, oh, after I read sections 3 and 4, I understood it. If you don't feel like you can understand it at all, great, that's an indicator that this might be complicated. But for now, I don't want people thinking, oh, this one is less clear than the other, and therefore I don't like it. We are going to work on it in the working group. Thank you.
Indeed, thanks. Tail.
So first, I guess I want to thank Paul, because I completely agree on that for both drafts. Like, to be clear, even though I am a co-author on the DELEG RR versus IDELEG, I think that as far as the requirements concerned, having been the co-author on the requirements draft, I think both protocols work in that sense. I don't think there are any requirement concerns for either one of them. And very specifically, I will say, as I've said on the list, that I think both of them are workable as they are so far described. And to the extent that draft language needs to be cleaned up, then that's great. But I actually really appreciate that that Philip and brought together a team to work on their proposal, because I think overall having this engineering discussion is going to make the best outcome. I still happen to think it's DELEG RR, and one of the reasons I have that opinion is in recognition of IDELEG. I do appreciate very much the way that the design of the protocol allows for the additional cost of resources, allows a easier implementation path overall in this incrementally achieving their goal. But what I'm having a hard time still trying to figure out is what's the long-term benefit of doing it that way. Like, I'll give them the check mark in the column for easier to roll out, but once we get into an internet where this is common, it's not clear to me at all that IDELEG has any advantage in that particular case, and I'm not sure that this minor gain in rollout is actually worth the extra changes that are necessary to facilitate it.
Thank you. Willem, I think you've been very patient, and I think you have a lot to say, so you're up next. Go ahead.
Yes. I wanted to respond to Andre. Andre had a few questions or remarks. One of them was that underscore DELEG could not be delegated. And is my audio much better now? My
It's
microphone
good. It's good.
audio?
Thank you.
It's good?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. But this is, there are measures in the draft that prevent legacy delegation of the underscore DELEG label at the apex. But you can outsource complete maintenance of all delegations in an incremental DELEG zone to a third party with a DNAME resource record. Then I also want to respond to Andre's remark that a resolver is not an application, but follows DNS protocol. So a resolver is also an application that uses DNS data to do its job. It finds the referral or the delegations right in the DNS. It's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, which causes a lot of problems in the DNS. One of the issues with this is that the DNS data that the resolver uses is the non-authoritative data that no other application will be using. It's using special data in the DNS. So I think it's much better if delegation or data or the referrals that resolvers will get are authoritative in the parent only. And admittedly, both proposals do that, with the exception that incremental DELEG has it right now and doesn't need cooperation of the authoritative. And then I do want to make another remark, because I believe it's like the classical internet architecture paradigm is to put all the intelligence at the edges of the internet, right? And that you don't need all the cooperation of the middle to make whatever you need to do work. So incremental DELEG can work with only resolver support. Authoritative are just to deliver the information, including where the referrals can be found, but they don't need to be at a special place that can only be found by resolvers. It's just public authoritative data like any other data. Yeah, I think I'll leave that at.
All right, thank you very much, Willem. And Philip, you're next.
Yeah, so there's at some point I think Andre made a comment like, yeah, the DELEG will mostly be for the root and the TLDs, and those are well organized parties, so that no problem if they have to make sure that all their name servers meet certain requirements. And then later Tail said, oh yeah, but soon there will only be DELEG, and we don't have to worry about all that old stuff anymore. My feeling is that there is a huge period, a long period of time between those two. There's nothing like we introduce a new protocol and magically in a couple of years everybody has switched whatever. And especially all of the smaller parties that run name servers or run recursors and stuff like that. Those are the less organized parties that don't know that they have upgraded all of their name servers. They don't know that they have upgraded all of the resolvers in their network. And I think that's where incremented DELEG has a huge benefit. Because if you have such a chaotic situation and the current internet is full of that kind of chaos, then incremented DELEG has a way higher chance of working and not creating a lot of confusion, because if you have to explain why something doesn't work and it is like, well, you didn't get this DELEG record because it's new parent side record and some software doesn't know about it, that is extremely hard to explain and debug. And I think in that case, incremental DELEG will just work a lot better because, like Willem said, like you can just use your existing tools and resolvers, etc., to query the state and look at what is really going on there. So that's the point I wanted to make at this moment.
All right, thanks, Philip. Ralph.
So just responding to that directly, I mean, the DELEG draft doesn't require the DELEG record to be anywhere, and it will not be served unless both the recursive and the authoritative understand it. So sure, for it to deploy it, the authority has to understand DELEG, but I mean, that's the whole point of the draft. We'll have to change that, and again, changes on the authority are easier. The other thing I think Willem said is that the internet is sort of intelligent on the edge and dumb in the middle or something like that. In DNS, it's sort of opposite because the stub resolver is very kind of a simple thing, and the authoritative servers are very simple, and you have this hugely complex thing in the middle, and you are making it more complex.
Go ahead, Roy, and then I'll do Andre.
Roy Adams, I can. I'm going to answer these questions for the working group really quick that I can answer. I think number one has been asked and answered, has been addressed well. I don't have any protocol concerns with either draft. I think from a technical perspective, they both work. If I then go on to 4, if I look at the Hamburg draft, there are 2 optimizations in there. Are basically, they are presumed optimizations. And these optimizations, number one, we don't have to implement it in authoritative servers. And that means that we can deploy it quicker. The other optimization, and the other thing is, of course, the alternative, not the alternative, sorry, the underscore DELEG tree. That's kind of an optimization to do things. We can CNAME it, we can DNAME it, all of the stuff is in the draft. But all of those optimizations come at a cost. The cost, for instance, for doing the, for the cost doing the tree, doing the separate tree, will introduce more points of confusion, right? And the other optimization of not having to deploy this in authoritative servers, in that same document also says, but you can optimize, and that's the third optimization. We can then optimize deployment by implementing it in authoritative servers, right? And I think all of these optimizations comes at a greater cost than the WebSlab document. And I think Donald Knuth once wrote in his 1974 paper, in 97% of all cases, this premature optimization is the root of all evil. And I think that's why I think that the WebSlab draft is a more cleaner, more future ready way to do this. The one thing that has no one mentioned yet, what the WebSlab document also does is pave a way to have future parent side only records, right? And is maybe not that specified in the document, but it is true. We can just, I mean, if for one point in the future DELEG doesn't work, just like NSEC, people had problems with NSEC. I'm very hesitant to name NSEC 3 now because probably gonna get some darts in my back. But with NSEC 3, we had to do some scaffolding, just like we have to do some scaffolding now for the WebSlab draft. But for future deployments of parent-side only records, right, we don't have to do more scaffolding if this is deployed. Thank you.
All right, Andre.
Oh, Andre. One thing I haven't said, I haven't been really involved in the development of neither of these drafts, so I'm speaking as an implementer because I just delegated this to Petr Špaček. So I want to react to what Philip said. So I haven't said that it's mostly for TLEs, but I do think that most of the delegations in the DNS tree happen at that level. Philip mentioned small folks, disorganized. I don't think these people do delegations. Maybe some. And at that time, do these small folks who are not understanding the DNS protocol, supposedly, is the IDELEG making it easier for them to deploy that? Personally, I'm not convinced that the IDELEG makes it more easy to deploy for people who just run the DNS and don't really understand it. Yeah.
Thank you, Andre. Tail.
I just wanted to clarify in my question about the, what's the end game and how does the protocol stack up there? I was not suggesting that in any time we're going to be in an environment where just everything is DELEG, right? We are going to have that long tail. There's no doubt about it. Long tails accepted, I guess. My overall point, though, was that as software gets rather quickly updated for resolvers that become DELEG aware, right, it will be very commonplace to have DELEG aware resolvers making these queries on the internet. Therefore, in that environment where things are, rolled out and authorities are handling it as well, what is the resource utilization there? If we have to optimize IDELEG to get it to the same place that DELEG is at, it really, all we're talking about is more resources in the meantime to facilitate the incremental rollout, and I don't think that's a clear trade-off that is obvious to make. And then the one other thing I'd meant to address is I'm not a root server operator. I know a few, though, and the root zone is very conservative in that even if we had like a really clear use case on what we'd want the root server delegations to do, they're probably going to be one of the last sets of servers that actually updates to using either version of the protocol. So TLDs is mostly where you're going to see a lot of the action.
All right, thanks, David. Philip.
Yeah, responding to Roy, also a bit to Tail. The thing about sort of the DELEG RR type is that you deploy upgraded software and then you can use it. If you would write an IDELEG draft with that in mind, then the IDELEG draft would become a lot simpler, because then you simply say, okay, the authoritative will insert the relevant delegation, the resolver picks it up almost unchanged. It's slightly more complex because you have a slightly different name, but by and large, that's not a big deal. So the complexity of IDELEG comes from trying to make deployment easier and make it work on existing software. And it's true that that comes with a cost, because if you add an additional requirement, it's like it should work on today's infrastructure. Then you have to do more stuff. But so I don't see the argument like it's more complex. It's like, yes, it's more complex because it tries to do more. Roy also mentioned that the DELEG R-type draft will probably lead to a situation where you have more parent site types if you want to do stuff in the future. But the fun thing is that with the IDELEG draft, because you have the _DELEG namespace, you already get all of the parent site types with that draft, and you don't even have to register them as parent site because any ordinary type will be fine. So I don't see a difference there. In fact, I think that's also a case where IDELEG just makes it easier to do stuff in the future. And then coming back to what Tail just said, is that if you look at sort of support places and whatever, then you see people are just running decades, well, not literally decades old, but very old versions of DNS software. And they encounter bugs that have been fixed a long time and whatever. So I'm not that optimistic about people quickly upgrading all of their software. Maybe it's the case for a few well-organized parties, TLDs, the big public resolvers. The rest of the internet just doesn't do that. So that's the few points I wanted to make.
Great, thanks, Philip. Carl?
Hi, Carl Dyson, Nominet. I've heard a number of times in this discussion that _DELEG doesn't have any alterations required for the authoritative server. But of course, if you want to be able to do this for anything that's delegated out of the TLD zone, there are a lot of implications for the registry.
Yes, that's true. I think that was, I forget whose slide had that, but that was, that's absolutely true. All right, Willem, are you back?
Yes.
All right.
All right. Yeah, I hear a lot of opinions, like it feels wrong, or it makes it more complex. I can also do the same. I can say no, the DELEG or having more types that are authoritative at the parents makes it more complex. So currently we have just 2 types that are authoritative or can be authoritative at the parent, DS and NSEC. NSEC 3 is not authoritative. It's just authoritative where it lives. It has not a special place, right? There's no change in semantics. So therefore, NSEC 3 was easy to deploy relatively to NSEC, I suppose. And NSEC started right from the start. Let me put it like this. I think it is easy, or to me, it feels like a more simpler model if you can look at a DNS name and know that this is a name that can always be looked up and contains the information that is needed to do something for a application. And so if the resolver can look up its referral information authoritatively without corner cases, the corner case that it's, oh, but this is an exceptional R type, which is only authoritative in the parent, then this hugely simplifies the understanding of the DNS for people that are new in the field. So this is my opinion.
Thank you, Willem. Paul.
Paul Hoffman. This room is full of people who know how to hand edit their zone files. That's not who and yet we're talking about how this will be deployed. It's going to be deployed to people who barely know how to edit their zone files. Both drafts have created new RR types that look funky, right? They've got a digit here, and then they've got another name and such like that. People are going to do it wrong, or, and I believe this is the long-term thing, regardless of which draft we choose, that information is going to get filled in by tooling, not by hand. Once you have tooling, both of these become highly equal. Does the tooling put something into the main zone? Does it put it into an underscore zone? Things like that. So these arguments about, oh, which will be easier? Easier for the people in the room? Sure. Easier for anybody else? Absolutely not. They're not going to understand the difference between a 0 and a 1, no matter what we tell them. They're going to copy and paste from Stack Overflow, which will still exist 30 years from now, and they're going to get it wrong if they're doing it that way. If they're using tooling, they're going to get it right regardless. So I don't agree with the arguments of this looks better or something like that. Either it's going to be done with tooling, or you're just going to have to hope that the person knows how to do it, and we should not be optimizing for that 5% of zone operators.
Thanks, Paul. Ralph.
Paul, you make the same mistake that I've seen often in the IETF circles. You think about the people that publishing the data. You think about the people that are kind of having zones or delegations or what have you. The people are probably overrepresented here. There's a lot of people out there that actually want to get the data. And there's a lot of people out there that work at ISPs or resolver operators that, when the shit hits the fan, need to debug that stuff. And that's a consideration I think we also need to take into account. And with that, I mean, for me, it's just easier to look at one point for delegations than to look at different points for delegations. So I wanted to answer, I think it was, I'm not sure it was Philip or Willem. So you said you make the incremental deployment easier. Well, you make it easier for the authoritative operator. Again, not for everybody else in the system. And even then, I would say you don't make it easier, because what happens if Google at one day says, okay, we're going to do IDELEG. Well, every authoritative server in the world will have double the amount of queries at that point. So that's, I think, I mean, for me, a huge kind of a problem. I mean, it probably won't affect us. I mean, we're Akamai. We can handle it. I mean, Google can handle it. I mean, Cloudflare, whatever, the people here in the room can handle it. But the small guys that we were talking about, they will just fall over.
Thanks, Ralph. So we've sort of temporarily locked the queue because I want to focus a little bit of attention on questions 2 and 3 here. The reason that we have these questions is because in Dublin we did a show of hands asking folks, you know, I forget the exact wording, but it was, you know, do you think approach A is workable and approach B is workable? And we got a fair number of no responses to those questions, right? So if people have technical reasons that they think one of the approaches is not workable, we'd really like to hear about those before our time is up today. But at that, I'll unlock the queue, and you can go back to your regular questions if you have them, or if you have thoughts on 2 and 3, we'd love to hear those. How do I unlock? Peter, go ahead while I figure out how to unlock the queue. There we go.
Yeah, so this is not an answer to 2 or 3, so I don't know. Okay.
I'll forgive you.
Okay. So Paul said once there is tooling, then it'll be all easy. True. My understanding was that the IDELEG proposal is for the time when there is no or only minimal changes to the authoritative side on the parent, in particular, no such tooling. So once you have that, once the parent the parent infrastructure has like that automation, then aren't you in a situation where the justification for doing this has gone away because it was meant for the time when there is no such tooling? Or I got it wrong, maybe.
Wes?
So in 7218, RFC 7218. I'm sorry, I'm Wes Hardiker, USC ISI ICANN board, not speaking for the ICANN board. We learned a lesson. The lesson was stop using zeros and ones. So Mr. Hoffman was 100% right. We need presentation formats that have understandability when you read them. So 72218, speaking of numbers, is changing DANE so that it's not 311 and 210 and the numbers that nobody understands and actually putting acronyms on. There is no reason we shouldn't do that here too. Thanks.
Thanks, Wes. Andre, go ahead.
So to answer your question about 2 and 3, from a technical perspective, and I still haven't turned every stone in bind source code, but my personal feeling is that it will be much more easier to implement the WESPLAP, the DELEG draft, than the IDELEG draft from the technical perspective inside the bind to answer these questions.
Thank you. Mark, go ahead.
Okay. I noted in the chat, but I'll say it here too, IDELEG is not deployable to every zone that exists today. It is technically impossible to deploy it to every zone that exists today. It has to do with the zone length. And in terms of you need to have enough provisioning to actually put the label in. And we know people push the DNS limits today for everything. There are zones which are maximal length today. And they're going to want to be able to do everything that DELEG is attempting to do with those zones.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. Willem, oh, sorry, Jim Reed is next.
Thanks, Dwayne. I'm sorry to say that I still can't make my mind up between both of the proposals. My gut feel suggests that the WESPLAP seems the right approach. I've got some concerns about _DELEG. But I think it's more, I've just asked this group to think long and hard about this. And I'm not sure we're in a position to make a definitive decision today. I think it's more important to take our time and get this right, because if we make the wrong decision, it's going to have to live with it for a long, long time.
Thank you, Jim. Willem?
Yes, I'd like to respond to Peter Thomason that said that once there is authoritative support, then it's basically the same as with WESPLAP DELEG. Then there's still an advantage with incremental DELEG because it doesn't require support from all the authoritatives of a zone. So a zone could be provisioned with an incremental DELEG supporting operator and still be provisioned with another name server at an operator that does not support it. So it also allows for an incremental migration path, so to say. Independent, you don't have to pick your operators based on the software they run. And then, yes, I want to acknowledge that indeed the _DELEG label shortens the length of the delegated to zone, but once you get there, you also need to view labels for the other labels within that zone. So, so indeed, the restriction for names to be delegated to is 253 octets, but after that, yeah, you still have 6 octets left for labels within that zone. But that's something we should add to the draft if we can continue with it after this session.
Thank you, Willem. Philip, go ahead, please.
Yeah, coming back to Peter's point, assuming that you have some provisioning software that generates a new zone, that provisioning software would basically be the same between IDELEG and the DELEG RR type. It's like, well, you put in some different names, but it's basically the same information. But what changes after that for the DELEG RR type, because the DELEG RR type is a new parent type, has a lot more impact. For example, your existing DNSSEC signing software cannot sign a zone with the DELEG RR type because it has to be aware that it's a new parent type. If you have any kind of sort of debug software, then that software has to use a DELEG aware resolver, because otherwise it cannot query for the DELEG RR type because it's a new parent type. So there's a lot of moving parts that all have to be in place before you can deploy a zone that has a DELEG RR type. Whereas if you deploy that with an IDELEG RR type, then of course, if some tools like say DNSFIS have not been changed, then they're unaware of the DELEG and cannot give the right answer. But other debug tools, like say, for example, DIG or whatever, they only require a small change to recognize the new type, or you can use the generic types, and it will just work with existing software, existing signers, etc. So I think there is a big difference between the drafts in this respect. There's one thing that we probably don't get to, is that my draft on DNSSEC, that if we want to do something with DNSSEC and DELEG, then if you do that with a new parent RR type, then you run into big problems if you have a validator that forwards to a recursive resolver that is not DELEG aware, which makes it very hard to enable that kind of validation by default if you also have a lot of customers that use forwarders. Certainly in the case of Unbound, we see that a lot of people use Unbound to forward to other recursors. Whereas with incremental DELEG, that thing would again just work. That's my points.
Thank you, Philip. Go ahead, Andre.
So, Andre, I still have trouble understanding who are these people who would like to deploy DELEG or IDELEG and can't upgrade the DNS servers. They are so eager to get the new stuff, but stuck with the old stuff. It reminds me the people who pay me to support newest PHP version on Red Hat 4, as an example. So if you want the new stuff, then upgrade. That's that's easy, in my books, at least.
Warren?
Warren Kamari, Google. So I'll sort of expand on something I said earlier. 10, 15 years from now, if I'm trying to explain to somebody how the DNS works, I think that I can fairly easily explain, this works, blah, blah, blah. You use the DELEG record, that's where it goes. I think if I was trying to explain, and then there's this other little part of the tree and you go and have a look there, and then I have to explain, we put that in because it seemed like a good way to deploy it faster, that feels hacky. Maybe it's just that I don't have the imagination for it, or if I'm trying to help somebody and explain like how to debug this, like you have to look over there. And yes, optimizing this for helping people understand it in the future is clearly not a goal. But the fact that it is this additional complexity, I think, is a fairly strong signal that the DELEG way is a better solution. It seems like this is an aesthetic thing, but it seems more elegant and therefore less likely to be confusing.
Thanks, Warren. Paul.
Paul Hoffman. So questions 2 and 3 are pretty specific. We've just had 15 or 20 minutes of people talking about it, and no one actually answered 2 or 3. They said, I have an operational preference. I have a visual preference. I have a future historical preference. I just want to be really clear, folks. Dwayne asked something really specific. We didn't have to get up and talk anyways. If we all believe that 2 and 3, the answer is no, then we could have just sat here. I believe we all can get up and give opinions for a long time. I would like to figure out when we're going to stop.
All right. Thanks, Paul. So at this point, we are going to do a show of hands poll for the fourth question here, which again is very much like the question we asked at the previous meeting in Dublin. So, Brian, are you queuing that up for us?
I am. It will be up in a second.
Okay.
Okay.
Dwayne, just a clarification. Are you asking just for a show of hands on question 4, or is the other 3 as well?
Only question 4.
Only question 4.
I don't know where the echo is coming from.
And Dwayne, we really do need to make the request that we have Jeopardy music playing when a show of hands poll goes out.
I'm sorry, Brian, could you repeat that?
We really need to make a request to the Meet Echo folks to play Jeopardy theme music when we put show of hands up.
Yeah, that sounds like definitely a new feature. All right, so we can all see the results here. I think, well, I don't want to speak too much for Brian, but I think we both would very much encourage anyone whose answer to this question was no. If you're comfortable, please come up and say why, or say what additional information you think you need in order to make this decision, because we are at the point where we need to decide. So I will unlock the queue if anyone feels comfortable sharing more information on that point. Hi, Willem.
Hi. So I think people need more time to play with running code and their own experiments to test out the delegations, the two alternatives in practice.
Okay, thank you very much. Wes?
I'm Warren Kamari. No, I'm Wes Hardiger. Warren Kamari was staring over my shoulder, watched me push no, and said I had to talk at the microphone. So, the reality is I understand both of them at least a little bit. I'm certainly not an expert, but the reason that I push no is that even if I think I could make a decision today, which I probably am leaning one direction, with this much discussion still going on in the community, it makes me feel like I am undereducated and we haven't seen all the corner cases. And to me, that makes it unsafe for me to make an opinion today.
Okay, thanks, Wes. Shane?
Yeah, so from my point of view, I guess what was compelling to me is Ralph's argument that this is going to be very expensive for resolver implementers, but I don't know that we actually have those implementations, or at least not enough of them that we can actually determine that. I feel like it's a heavy lift to ask the implementers of the very few implementations that we have to go through all the work of implementing a draft that might get thrown away. So I guess I feel like, yeah, that's what makes it hard for me to have a strong feeling, basically. That's it.
All right, thanks, Shane. Hi, Peter, I see you in the queue. Go ahead.
Hello. Okay. Hello, everyone. The trouble with more implementation is that I'm just not willing to spend time implementing both, because there are also other projects on this planet which need doing. So I would much rather decide one way or other, then we can go and everyone implement the same thing. And then, of course, down the road, if we find out, okay, we've, lost our minds, we need to decide again, drop the selected proposal on the floor and work on the other one, that's still possible. I mean, we are not going to marry everyone to one draft, right? So I think that for efficiency reasons, it would be way better to select one now, then implement it. And if we find blockers or serious concerns, then we can revisit that. We are not like signing agreement and giving our souls to draft we can select now.
All right, thanks, Peter. Willem?
Yes. Okay, Peter, you don't have to do it. I will do it. I already implemented WESPLAB DELEG in NSD, and we already have the incremental DELEG in both NSD and Unbound. We just have to add DELEG also to Unbound, and both protocol proposals can be compared in practice, and all the corner cases can be explored. Or maybe not all of them, but we can search for the corner cases and explore them.
Thanks again, Willem. Andrew?
Hi, Andrew Campling. Just two thoughts. One is, it was a long time from the last meeting to this one, and the mailing list has been pretty quiet. So there's been ample opportunity for people to gather information up until this meeting. And then secondly, having agreed with kind of what Peter said, I think it'd be invaluable to do a repeat of the show of hands exercise from the last meeting to see if there's been any fundamental change, and then maybe, dare I say, edge towards making a decision sometime, but certainly at least the show of hands here on to try and establish what the feeling in the room is on which way they're leaning towards the two, please.
Okay. I'm seeing some nods in the room, a couple at least. Okay. Brian, what do you think about that? You want to queue it up?
Yep, I can do that.
Okay.
Okay.
So first of all, thanks everyone for doing the show of hands and sticking with us today. We're at or just a little bit over time, and obviously we need to continue this this debate, this discussion on the mailing list. So the chairs will take that action in the next couple weeks to perform the same sort of questions on the list, and at that point, we hope to have a consensus on this. So. I think that's it for today. Thanks for everyone being here and having polite discussions.